We're live on YouTube. So okay, it's live on YouTube and we are unmuted.
All right. It is now 5:01 and I call this February 13th meeting of the Historic Review Committee to order. Melina, may we please have the roll call?
David Poland, who's absent. Mike Garriak.
No.
Maria Zamora. Present. Melissa Childs.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Mayor Furman. And Chairperson Rowe.
I am here. Okay, are there any revisions to the agenda?
Not from staff.
All right, so the first item is the approval of the minutes. I sent a spelling note to Anna, but aside from that, are there other revisions to the minutes before we approve them? All right, seeing no discussion, can we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Oh, I'll make the motion to accept the
Okay,
next minutes.
I'll second you. Let's call the question, Melina.
Mike Garriak.
Yes.
Maria Zamora.
Yes.
Melissa Childs.
Yes.
Chairperson Rowe.
Okay, minutes pass. All right, so moving on to public hearings, we have none tonight. So committee business, we have 3 items up for discussion: the bylaws, Bob's rules, and then the staff report format. And then also there's a staff report on 661 Green. And I guess I would ask, I know we already did revisions to the agenda, but is there anyone from staff who's just staying for that report who would want it to go first before we talk about the other stuff? No. Okay, cool. Well, the first item is the bylaws. Just as a reminder, the bylaws have been approved as revised, but we wanted to see the revised version again. Staff, is there anything to report on the bylaw revision?
No, I made the revisions requested, and those were included in the packet as well as a red line version sent out to the committee. So I believe that is all that was requested. However, if there are any more revisions, I would take those comments now.
Okay, has everyone read and absorbed the bylaws? Okay. Do we have discussion on the bylaws? All right, seeing none, I would request that we call the question. I will move to pass. I guess we already passed them as amended last meeting, so I don't think we actually have to pass them. So that's more of a discussion item. All right, we will close the discussion on the bylaws then. The next item for discussion is Bob's rules of order. I'll just preface this by saying I had asked staff to just kind of include that in the packet, and this is an opportunity for us to discuss if there's anything we want to do that sort of deviates from Bob's rules. I highlighted last time that, for example, we might choose to kind of customarily always recognize non-committee members for staff for anything, like just as a point of the way we do order, I guess, in our committee meetings, so that staff has an opportunity to contribute, because we rely very heavily on staff in this committee. Another item that was brought to my attention, not by this committee, but just on someone on the board of trustees, is that it is customary for some Colorado committees to use point of privilege, which is something that I've also seen used. And that's really just if someone like needs to go to the bathroom. That's something you can use that's not in here that we could choose to adopt as a rule that we would use as a committee, for example, that allows discussion to I would say point of privilege, I'd like to use the restroom. And then we would pause the committee meeting for however long the restroom break is, and then everyone could come back. So that's one thing that was mentioned to me about this.
Yeah. That just seems like common sense.
It does seem like common
Dang.
sense. We don't do it on our other committee meetings in the town though, so I thought we could touch on that.
No, it's common sense.
You like that? Okay.
Yeah.
So Clayton's here with us. So Clayton, if, for example, we wanted to to add point of privilege is something that we use. Like, do we need to do a formal resolution of any kind for that, or are we good just making an agreement today?
No, and I think, the great thing about Bob's rules is that you can adopt them, but there are like, I don't know what you're talking about exactly. I know there's a section somewhere in Bob's rules about like a moving party's privilege. I don't think that's what you mean, but
No.
one of the great things about Bob's rules is the chairperson is the parliamentarian of the meeting. And so if you say, I'd like to take a break and recess for the purpose of using the restroom, then, a motion to recess is already built into all this. So like you can do that. I would just say the great thing about Bob's rules is that you don't have to be so formal. And I would kind of embrace that and let the chairperson kind of decide with some flexibility how it works with versus like adding stuff to Bob's rules. I think if you're going to do anything with Bob's rules, my suggestion is take something away. But because the chairperson as a default serves as the parliamentarian, they can just say, hey, Madam Chairperson, I'd like to take a 10-minute recess so I can use the restroom. And you say, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So we can just know that if anyone needs to go to the restroom, like just mention it and we'll pause. No need to be uncomfortable.
Right.
Right. Another thing that I know that Bob's rules and most parliamentary procedure has is a time limit for the floor. So that's something that we don't use necessarily on the Board of Trustees right now, but is pretty typical, I think, in all levels of government, which is essentially if you have thoughts about the motion in question, you speak to them within a certain time frame. And I'm curious how you all feel about that. The default is 5 minutes.
That sounds reasonable. Agreed.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think personally, my perspective on this is that the purpose of Bob's rules is to have efficiency and also politeness so that people are not interrupting each other and so forth. And the time limit is helpful for that efficiency because you kind of need to have your thoughts prepared if you have a 5-minute time limit. So it sounds like we're good with that. I'd just like to highlight that since with Bob's rules and all parliamentary procedure, public and staff don't have the same level of privilege given to them in the parliamentary procedure, we would need to essentially ensure that since we rely heavily on staff to recognize staff proactively so that they can speak. Obviously, staff wouldn't speak out of turn, just like we wouldn't speak out of turn as committee members. But I think we can, like Clayton mentioned, be very casual about this. And with our 3-minute just now adopted in the bylaws public time limit, I think we're already giving preferential treatment to committee members to speak their minds versus the public. So that's kind of covered.
Yeah, and I would add a point there. I found it in the rule, just so you're aware, I'm just not making stuff up. The general rules governing the meeting and Bob's rules state that the chairperson, this is under chairperson discretion, may independently decide to deviate from the rules of order in order to increase meeting efficiency and to best enable full and informed discussion of a matter before the body. So that's where you get the, discretion and authority to be like, okay, let's take a 10-minute break so everybody can come back and be like focused on the particular agenda item or whatever.
Yeah, and that's page 3, chairperson serves as parliamentarian that you're pulling that from, or somewhere else?
I'm looking at a 2021 PDF version. It's on page 6 under general rules governing the meeting. But there are newer versions out there. It's just, you get this is the one I've been working off of. I think there's a 2023 version, but there's not a lot of substantive change. And some people like the hardback. I like electronic stuff, so I don't have to carry around a bunch of books. But it's in there.
Yeah, okay. It's on our page 6 if you have the packet as well. And I do think that it's just worth highlighting so that I don't dominate this committee, that any person on the committee who is a committee member can say point of order and challenge the chairperson. if the feeling is that I am not being parliamentary or I'm being non-procedural. So please keep me honest by utilizing that power and privilege that belongs to all of you committee members. I'm just wondering also, for those who maybe haven't operated in a parliamentary procedure environment before, is there anything that you read in here that you thought was like weird or maybe we shouldn't do? I guess the only other thing I saw was like, often we don't repeat the motion 3 times. Like we don't have somebody say the motion and then the committee chair says, there's now a motion on the floor to say the motion again. And then once the motion passes, say, the following motion just passed. So I don't know that we need to do that, but I think that is implied in here that you have to do that.
Well, I guess that goes back to how formal we want to be.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I guess
Exactly.
we're all good with it. That could be all right.
Yeah, and you can always ask clarity on a motion that's on the table, like as a point of order, you can say, you know, could someone please repeat the motion?
In most organizations that I've seen and been part of, the chairperson has a discretionary role to stop things, move things forward, and so forth. She's the boss. What that means is she can say, oh, you know, make an intervention or something. That's what your role is as the chairperson, is to be able to say that. So I agree with Maria, something, we got to be a little flexible about this and not be so stringent. We're going to drive ourselves crazy with the stringency. So be flexible and you will have the power to stop things, start things, so forth. And I certainly think that's the way it should work. When I was president of the Blair Street Historic District Association, I had that power. Stop things, start things, and so forth, because sometimes people get out of hand and they ramble and so forth. But you were the one to tell me to stop rambling or whatever it is. I mean, sometimes it's just practical and real simple without, you know, we need the rules, but sometimes it's just a simple thing, straightforward.
Sure, and I would just invite anyone from the committee that doesn't want to call me out during the committee because they're kind and polite, which many of us in Silverton are, to please just, if you want to pull me aside after a meeting and say, I think you should have diverted the conversation earlier or whatever, because I'm learning along with all of us about how to run this committee. So, to Mike's point, you know, I have a certain responsibility to keep us on task. And if I'm not doing that, like, please tell me.
And slow it down.
I think the only other thing I saw that we've been doing customarily already is we have been calling each other by first names instead of, you know, Madam Secretary for Melina and so forth. And I think that's nice. We all know each other on a first name basis pretty much anyway. Are you guys good with that?
Yes, I am.
Totally.
Okay. It's not a lack of respect that I refer to you all by first name. It's like affinity instead. All right. Okay. Well, should we close the topic of Bob's rules? Other thoughts?
So I have to reread them. But that'll be on my time. I don't want to do.
Okay. All right. So we'll turn the discussion to the new staff report format then. And I'd love to hear from CC and CPS on this item. Please.
Great, thanks. I'll let Sheila introduce this one unless you want me to start.
No, I can start. So, if you, as you recall, sure you all know, you had us create a checklist. And at first we were trying to do a scoring system to help with the review of the applications. And then we just created a checklist. Basically, the checklist is verbatim from the code and the builder's handbook. And And then the last one, there was a little misunderstanding of if you wanted us to fill it out, we thought that you would be using it more as a tool as part of your review. But based on feedback, what we're looking at now is using it as a tool for the applicant to fill out. And then once they fill it out, for staff to review. And then this is the meat of your staff report when an application comes to you. So you'll have a staff report that is the short who, what, when, where, why of the application, who it is, what they want. And at the bottom would be staff recommendations and other recommendations as far as motions and things. The meat of the application will be in the checklist where the applicant says if they did or didn't meet it, or if it's not applicable at all. Staff will also review that, provide you our comments on that checklist. And then that is how we think it might help you stick to the specific criteria for each of the applications that come before you. So we took the long checklist, broke it out into the different sections. So like, commercial on Blair, commercial on Green, so that you only get the checklist, or the applicant only gets the checklist, we only get the checklist, and you only get the checklist of the specific application and the one that goes with it. So wanted to get some feedback on that. We put some samples in there of what it might look like, but wanted to have a little further discussion so that when we come back with the next application, which we probably will in March or April, we're a little closer to it. And knowing that as this committee is evolving, we'll try to evolve it as well. But hopefully this next stab will be a little closer to what it is we think you need or want from us.
Thank you, Sheila. Just as a follow-up question, you said you put some examples in it.
Well, the example checklist of like how we're separating it out into the different sections. So I think that's in there, maybe.
Okay, like not an example scenario.
No.
Oh, okay. So, discussion on the checklist format.
I like the checklist. Keeps everything simple, straightforward. And it makes it the same for everyone. So no one that they're getting pushed around and so forth, say, well, if I'm doing something, the checklist is the same for me as it is for you or someone else. So I don't know who came up with this checklist idea. I like it. And I like that the applicant start in whatever district that we have here, the new, the old, the Blair Street, the Green Street. Glad that was broken out, because that does make a difference. And so I very much like this checklist idea,
Awesome,
in my
thanks.
opinion.
I also like the checklist. I'm just wondering, and this is a question, is if we need to have page numbers on the bottom. Is that
Yes.
necessary?
I like page numbers. So when something gets turned over, I know if I'm looking at the back or the front. So we will add page numbers.
Thank
Good.
you very much.
Lovely,
Good idea. Thanks.
great idea. Melissa, did you have thoughts on the checklist?
I think it's great. Yeah, no, this is exactly the kind of tools that we need. So good job.
Awesome. So the only thought I had on it, besides kind of what I already shared with you, Sheila, about how, the proof is in the pudding, like we'll see once we start using it, right? And there are some scenarios that will come before us which the builder's handbook doesn't address. And so those gaps already exist regardless of the checklist. Any gap in the checklist is just a reflection of the gap in the code. Is just the feedback I've heard that the builder's handbook has a lot of suggestions in it that aren't necessarily code. Like, you should do this, but not necessarily must. And so I do wonder if, as we start to receive these, the items that are must versus should will be obvious to us. I don't think there's a better format, but I think we should probably watch for that, because one thing about a checklist by nature is, like, can we check the box that this is done? And some of them are you must, and some of them are you should. So I think we'll have to, that'll be like a delicacy of how we probably use it going forward, I would guess. But it sounds like we do have some consensus. I don't think we have anything to vote on about this, but it sounds like we do have some consensus that we like it, and let's try it. And
Yeah, I'm all for streamlining things, and I think a checklist like this is a streamlined version of what you need to do.
I think it will be shorter than the staff report format that otherwise could ensue with all the narratives. So I like it from that perspective.
Yeah, and our goal is to keep the analysis in the checklist. And again, the staff report, just a summary of the facts of what they're asking for. And if, for instance, we have one of those where it's the residential and Blair conversion versus the commercial and it doesn't really fit, we'll highlight that in the staff report so you know why we chose a specific checklist to use. And maybe we can highlight some of the other discrepancies in there. I know you've mentioned a few of them. So we might add that level of detail in the staff report, but really we're aiming for the meat of it to be the black and white well, as black and white as the builder's handbook can be in the checklist.
Wonderful.
I like that.
Thank you. Well, I just want to commend Sheila and Lucy for the work they did to put this together. So thank you all for making our jobs easier.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on then to staff reports. Last time we had a revision to the agenda for 661 Green Street. It was taken off the agenda because of a code enforcement situation, and we just asked to hear a little bit more about that from staff. So Lucy, if you want to address, or whoever on staff.
And we're actually going to defer this to Clayton right now.
Oh, okay. Great.
All right, thanks, Laura. Yeah, so for the committee's knowledge notification, that it wasn't removed because of a code enforcement issue. The actual application packet was removed because it didn't reflect the reality of the construction. And I'm sure at this point, the committee is aware that this is a post-construction application, which is atypical of the process. What I would just, because there are, there's parallel proceedings here, right? There's possible legal ramifications for, what the applicants have done, aside from your review of their application. But just understand that, like, when you do receive an accepted application that does reflect the, the reality of the construction that's already been completed, then you'll just be reviewing it as a case of first impression. So, just look at the application and apply your rules and make a determination. Understanding obviously that, there was an issue, but that shouldn't be a factor in your considering the application. What the board eventually will be looking for from you is whether you recommend the application as submitted, and disregarding the fact that it's already been done. You have to apply the same sets of values and conditions to this application as you would any other application. I hope that makes sense.
So are you stating that we should have seen the application after all? Or
no, so what happened with the original application is that staff determined that the application itself did not represent the actual construction. So because it's a post-construction application, you'd be reviewing something that basically was an impossibility. When what we are looking at is completed construction on a project pre-permit, which of course is alleged a violation of our town code and process. So we didn't want you to waste your time reviewing an application that wasn't even going to be able to be acted on. If and when the applicants submit a completed application that, again, that reflects the reality of the construction already completed, then staff will accept it for your review.
okay, thank you for clarifying.
Because I don't think the applicants mean to like do the construction over again, right? So it didn't make sense from staff's perspective.
Does that make sense, everyone? Do you guys have more questions?
Yeah.
Where is this at right now? I don't understand. So the application came in and then it was struck from the agenda. What's going on with it now?
Well, I believe staff is just waiting for a completed application. we're waiting to see the actual, like what the application should look like, which again would reflect the reality of the construction that's already been completed.
And so what are the ramifications if like someone does this? Like, is it like a stop work order? Is there like, I mean, is
Yeah,
it,
that's all, and that's something I didn't really want to get into because we're
Okay.
dealing with that. There's people on the board that also serve as appellate authority on the board of trustees that also are privy to the committee. And so we don't want to discuss any, legal issues that would preclude them being objective on a later date and possibly at a public hearing. So
okay,
there's a whole nother parallel process for violation of the code, but you guys don't have to deal with that.
okay. And so if someone brings an application to us and then we approve it, say, and then they go off and do something else, that's not for us to deal with.
That's right. That's a similar example of a violation of the code of the process.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
This will happen again.
Mhm.
I've been here long enough to know that this is definitely going to happen again. But we're not necessarily the enforcement agency, something. We give our,
Right.
feelings on this and stuff like that, but then someone else has to enforce it. But I'm just saying, been here a long time and this has happened many times and it's gonna happen again. So I don't know if that prepares us for it necessarily, but
Well,
It
it's
will.
not gonna be our issue, so.
Oh.
All right, well, any other discussion on 661 Green Street from the committee or staff?
Sheila has her hand raised.
Sorry. I had a quick question. So if a application comes in where they've done work prior to the HRC reviewing it, does the HRC have an obligation to approve that?
Oh, no, absolutely not. So yeah, I thought it, again, I think clearly and then maybe don't say the things as clearly as I think them. You want to look at this, any application you get that's accepted, you want to look at as a case of first impression. You don't want to bring in any outside factors or say, oh, this person already did this and I don't like it, or apply any other factors other than what you're supposed to be considered according to the code. And so in an instance such as this, since you are obviously aware of kind of what's happening, you would just look at the application as if the construction has not been completed yet, and then make your recommendations. If you do approve them, fine. If you don't, then that's a whole nother issue for the applicant since they've already completed construction. But you're obligated to make an objective review based on the standards that have been set by the town code.
Guess I have a question. So in an example of 661, they're replacing the windows, right? That was what was well, there was more than just the windows in front of us with the application. But where does the historic review come into play when something like repairs and maintenance, replacing failed windows, for example, where does this get kicked into review? What's the code behind that?
So there are certain thresholds that there are certain thresholds in the code that require construction or repair or maintenance to go down different avenues. And once, for example, I think it's explicit in the code that replacement of windows would be something that the HRC has to review because it's an external construction. It affects the character and unique nature of the property, which is controlled by the overlay district, et cetera. And don't quote me exactly, but those are the loose terms of that particular example. But there are also the descriptions in the code that say, minor repairs of, already existing, like say, for example, they're gonna, varnish the floor or do something that's pre-existing. The code delineates that, HRC doesn't have to see every little repair and piece of maintenance, but that certain things rise to the level of HRC review, which again is, you know, your review, and then that creates, depending on your decision, a set of decisions for the applicant. If you deny it, then they have the opportunity to go to, you know, the board as an appellate authority, for example. So that's all in the code. That's not, you know, we don't make that particular determination. The code has already, you know, kind of expressed that.
And so same thing, like if someone already has an approved application and then they want to do something different, like they would come back to us with that revision if it's substantial. Again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What you're approving is their, so I know you know this because you've seen it, but when you get an application, there's typically a blueprint, pictures of examples of what they're going to do, color schemes for any new paint, and you then take that information and plug it into your analysis of whether or not this fits with the nature of the historic overlay district, and the factors that, you know, determine whether or not you would approve or deny that. Once you approve that, you're approving that application construction, or, you know, project, whatever it is, and they have the approval to do that. That doesn't mean you've approved them, given them some sort of blank check to then go do whatever. It's very specific, and again, the code delineates this. So yeah, no, they can only do what you approve. An applicant can only do what you approve. But not all projects require, you know, you to review it. Again, if you're reviewing like repainting of the ballast and a stairwell, then, you know, you know, you're overstepping your authority. And again, that's all contemplated in the code.
Thanks, Clayton. Yep. All right, further discussion on 661 Green. Okay, I think we can move to public comment then. So we will start with in-person comments and then move to comments on Zoom. Each commentator will have 3 minutes. Please state your name. And if you are online, raise your hand to comment. The YouTube does not support public comment. Please.
Hello, committee. My name is Ben Blue. I have submitted an HRC application, so I look forward to presenting it to you soon. My property is located in the A-Rod district, so it'll be a fun one. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks for your introduction.
There's no more in-person public comment. Jordan Razuk. I apologize if I'm butchering your name, sir.
Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody. And that was close, Razuk, but I won't hold it against you. So bear with me here. I actually just had to log back in. It kicked me off when you guys were wrapping up the 661 Green Street conversation. So apologies if I'm repeating anything. I represent one of the owners of that property, and I just wanted to chime in tonight on the window situation with, I guess, a few points and just really looking for a path forward. So on the windows, I guess when we were going through the application process, we got kind of some different, I guess, directions forward. So long story short, they didn't end up going in before this application was approved. That being said, we felt that we were able to do so. Number one, Melissa brought this up. The old windows were failing. We tried to replace like for like. We actually consulted some people from the historic committee on what to do with that and like which direction to go. And they pointed us in the direction of some windows you guys actually used on a different building on a prior project. So I guess we were a little shocked when our application got removed, and then we did get a fine for it. And, you know, all that being said, we were ready to move forward and just pay the fine and move forward. I guess our goal is not to ruffle any feathers here. We do want to play by the book. So we were a little confused, but no harm, no foul. Let's pay it and move on. But then we were told that we were actually not in violation from the inspector. I guess for the points that I had made previously, that they had failed. There was, you know, no need to seek a permit. And I guess all that being said, now we have a new application in that I guess cannot be reviewed until we get this matter resolved. And we've been trying to get it resolved for about a week and a half now. Haven't been able to get a clear answer on if we're in violation, if we have to pay something, if we're not in violation, if we can move on and have our application reviewed. So really just trying to kind of clear up any confusion today and move forward with our project so we can have it open back up by the summertime and able to help all the visitors coming into town. So that was a lot. Let me pause there and I'll take it back to you guys.
Thank you for your comments, Jordan. I would encourage you to submit any concerns to staff.
Yeah, and this is typically I don't respond to public comment, but Mr. Zook, we're gonna sit down. We need to sit down, the town staff and myself and you, and discuss the situation, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, and we're gonna, make it very clear what needs to happen.
Sure. And I think that's what it's been from the beginning. Just if we could sit down and kind of talk through it, sure, we could get through that quickly.
Yes,
I'll
sir.
actually be in town in a couple days if you guys are around.
Yeah, we'll figure out something. And there's a lot of staff schedules to deal with, and that's not my call. But I just wanted to let you know that me and code enforcement, town manager, at least are going to sit down with you and discuss. And you said you're an agent of the owners, is that correct?
I'm one of the owners, yes.
Okay, you're an owner. I was going to say, if you're not an owner, then you need legal agency to discuss it, just as a forewarning. But if you're an owner,
Yep, we should be good. So any other direction on it tonight, or just kind of let's talk in person at a later date? It's kind of the answer I'm hearing right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Rizek, without us having an item on the agenda that you're an applicant or something, we can't really comment, and we don't typically respond to public comment. So
Sure.
I would suggest you and Clayton kind of take this conversation offline. Thanks a bunch.
Okay. Thank you for your time. I'll reach out to you separately, Clayton.
All right. Is there any other public comment tonight? Okay, seeing none, I would like to move to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, great. I'll second your motion. Fantastic. All in favor, or sorry, roll call, please.
Mike Dariak,
Yes.
Gloria Swamp,
Yes.
Melissa Childs,
Yes.
Chairperson Rob.
Yes. All right, this meeting's over. Thank you.
Thank you.